Hello. What is your name?
Bob Tellman,
And where were you born?
Columbus, Indiana.
So you've lived here all of your life,
Right.
except for those years in service? Did
Right.
you? How old were you when the war was declared?
I was 21, I guess.
Were you drafted?
Yes.
And do you remember where you were when Pearl Harbor was bombed?
Yes, I do.
What were you doing?
I was in the service,
Where you were?
and I was in Fort Worth, Texas, on a weekend pass.
Oh,
And all these were canceled and reported back.
just like that, you had no more leave then, did you?
No more leave.
Yes. What area of service were you in?
At that time, I was in the 36th Division, infantry.
Infantry. What was your rank?
Well, I was private then.
Yeah.
I'd just been in the service 6 months almost.
Had you enlisted or were you drafted?
I was drafted.
Yeah. Right out of high school?
No, I was 21 years old.
Were you?
Yes.
Had you gone to school? Had you gone to college?
No, I didn't go
You
to
didn't.
college.
So you were living here in Columbus when you were
Right.
drafted. Were you married then?
No.
You were, okay. Were you overseas?
Yes.
Where were you? Where did you?
I was in Europe.
In France, in Italy?
In Belgium and Germany.
What were some of the battles?
Well, I wasn't in any battles. I was a replacement, and I was never called. I was over there. I went over in early of 45 is when I went. I spent most of my time on the West Coast.
What did you do there? What were your duties?
Well, I started out, I was in the 36th Division, and our commanding, then the division moved out. We went to the Northwest Coast and did guard duty for several months, and then our commanding officer said they were going to form an MP company, and he'd like for me to go with him if I would. I didn't have to. So I went with him, and then I ended up, I was in the MPs for almost 3 years.
It was pretty rough, though, wasn't it, being an MP back then?
But I was at a Japanese relocation center in Tule, California.
How did you find that, Bob? How did it have any effect on you at the time that the Japanese were interred?
How did it affect me?
Yeah.
I'll tell you, at that time, if you were on the West Coast, a lot of people, you know, have different opinion, but at the same time, national security was at risk. When we were on the West Coast, we did guard duty on the beaches and the railroad bridges and shipyards before that, and I mean, everyone expected them to invade any time. I mean, it was really scary.
Well, and you were were you in Europe when the D-Day was announced? Or you went over in 45, though, didn't you, said?
Yes, I went over in the early part of 45.
And where were you on VJ Day?
On BJ Day? On VJ Day, I was home on leave to be shipped out to go to Japan for 30 days.
That was canceled?
That was canceled later, and they sent me another 30-day extension. I reported Atterbury for discharge on November 10th.
Oh, what a break that was. Did you have any siblings in the service, brothers or sisters?
No.
And were you married after the war then?
Yes, after the war.
Uh-huh. And how did you hear about war news? Did you get it through Stars and Stripes when you were overseas, radio?
By radio, Stars and Stripes.
Did you see any of the famous correspondents when you were overseas?
No, I didn't. I didn't get to see Ernie.
We used to listen to them every night.
Yes,
It was fabulous listening to the bombs dropping in London. And Edward R. Murrow, right there in the thick of it. It brings chills to me when I think about it today. So how do you think that history has treated World War II? Do you think it's been fairly presented?
Oh, I think it has. I mean, they seem to be trying to, but actually the younger generations really don't realize what a tremendous cost in lives was in World War II, which most haven't even heard about it. I talked to a party the other day, and he was asking something about the war, and he didn't know anything about it. He didn't know they had compulsory training, you know, military training at that time, and he said, well, I never heard of such a thing. So
It probably sounds very tyrannical to him now, to that person that you were talking to.
well, it doesn't, I don't, just from his reactions, I don't think they really, it doesn't sink in. I mean, the tremendous cost it really was for the freedom we enjoy today.
Do you think that the schools could do a better job of teaching about the war?
I think what they kind of have to stress is the tremendous price that we paid in World War II, the number of lives that were lost.
Well, that leads me to the civilians. Did you feel that the population was supporting the war back when you were in California, for instance?
Oh, yes, I definitely think. I think the population back then really got behind it.
More so than any other time in the whole history of the country.
Yes.
Yes. I felt that way too. Can you tell me anything that you would like to remember or recall about that period of your life?
I wouldn't take $1 million for it, and I wouldn't care to go through it again.
No, of course you wouldn't.
No, it was, let me see, when I left for a year. I was working at Cummins at the time, and I told those guys out there, I said, well, when I come back in 1942 in June, well, I'll see you guys leave.
Yeah. Well, it didn't happen that way, did it?
No, it didn't.
Well, thank you very much, Bob, for sharing your memories with us. And
Okay, you're welcome.
have a good evening.
Okay, thank you.
What is your name, please?
Don Burbrink.
You were born where?
I was born in Jackson County, just south of the Bartholomew County line.
Down around Seymour.
Yeah.
How long have you been in Bartholomew County?
Well, about 40 years.
40 years. That's good.
Yeah.
Now I'll ask you a good question. What do you remember most about the war?
Oh, I was just thinking, I remember after being in the service with men, how close we got and what great friends we got to be. That's one of the things that I remember. And some of the other things that I remember most were some of the atrocities and things that I viewed that happened over in Germany after the war. We toured some of those concentration camps. And,
after the war?
yeah,
Right.
after the
okay.
war.
Yes.
So those are the kind of things you remember the most, I think.
And how old were you at that time you was over there?
Let's see, I was about 20 years old then, when I was overseas.
And you were in what branch of service?
I was with an infantry division, but I was in a signal company.
What was your job?
102nd Signal Company.
What was your job?
I was a motor messenger.
Motor messenger.
Yeah.
You were close to the front line at times then?
Towards the end of the war, it got kind of dicey because they sent us out a lot of times. Our units were, I read the other day, where we might have a 150-mile round trip, and oftentimes got into territory where maybe no Americans had been.
Right.
So,
Now, were you under General Patton?
no, I was with the 9th Army.
9th Army,
Yeah,
not the
that
3rd. Okay. How's your life changed now since you were a soldier and come back to civilian life?
Well, I don't know. I was pretty young and I was a student, and then I think after the war, when I returned home, I got married pretty quickly, so I had some children, so life really changed a lot in that way. But as far as, the way things changed that affected me, I just haven't given a lot of thought to that.
But living back here was different than it was before you went into the war, right?
Well, yeah, it was. Especially after a few years, why, things changed pretty
Right.
rapidly.
And you were in World War II.
I was in World War
Okay.
II.
Do you remember Pearl Harbor?
Yeah.
What were you doing that day?
I think I was on a Sunday, wasn't it? I was at home and I was listening to the radio, hear about it.
Heard on the radio.
Yeah.
Right. What about D-Day? Where were you then?
See, D-Day, I guess I was in, I must have been in, still in Texas. Because,
Still in Texas.
Yeah. Right after that, I came over to Fort Dix before I went overseas. So, but in June of '6, we were in Texas.
You went overseas. Did you go direct to England or did you go direct to...
No, I went to Cherbourg.
Cherbourg.
Yeah.
Oh, Germany.
Yeah, in France, the Cherbourg Peninsula.
Yeah, France. You went in, what beaches?
Well, it
Or did you?
was. We didn't go on a beach. I got there in September, about the 13th, something like that, and they were beginning to unload ships at Cherbourg Harbor.
I see. You went in the
So
harbor.
we had to wait 2 days on the ship because it was so rough that they couldn't. See, we got off the ship onto, I guess they call them lighters, you know.
Right.
And
That's always fun being on
so,
those ships.
We stayed on the boat or on the ship 2
Right.
days
Good
to
night.
the water to get calm enough.
Uh-huh. And where were you when the war ended in Germany?
On the Elbe River,
Elbe River.
Tangermunde, Germany.
You were on a ship then?
No, this was the Americans got as far as the Elbe River, and Mike says this is as far as we go. So we stayed there, and a lot of the Germans were surrendering. They were trying to get away from the Russians, and there happened to be a railroad bridge there that had been bombed, but you could still, it dipped down in the water, but you could still wade through, and people were trying to get away from the Russians, and we were right there in that town.
Were these German soldiers?
These were German soldiers, German civilians,
The civilians also?
and they were throwing their weapons. They had stacks of rifles as way, and we got a whole gunny sack full of pistols.
Oh, boy.
So
Those are
but we
valuable.
were really waiting for the war to be over then.
Right. It was almost over.
Yeah.
What about VJ Day? Where were you then?
I think I was down after the war. I was in Europe almost a year after the war because I didn't have enough points to get out. And I think I was down in Bavaria, down along the Danube River, because I remember us having a big party out along the river.
How did you hear that the war had ended?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't remember specifically. No.
Yeah. That was a great day. I can remember that.
Yeah.
Now, do you have any other? Your family was in the service. Brothers, sisters?
Well, my brother had to go, and I had an uncle or two that was in
They
the
both in World War II.
Yeah.
Right. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any special memories you might have of the war?
Well, I was thinking a while ago. One of the things that I really remember is having when we landed in France. We were 30 days in an apple orchard in pup tents, and it was a nice grassy orchard when we went in. When we went out, it looked like a hog wallow. And I remember having wet feet and 2 pair of shoes, both shoes,
Oh, boy.
feet wet, and sleeping on the ground in the water. I'll never forget that.
Wasn't too enjoyable. I know that. Okay.
And
And
I remember one other thing.
Okay.
The first jet airplane I ever saw was shooting at us. So
that was a German plane?
yeah, a German plane.
Yes.
We were really scattered.
Didn't know what they were. We saw
But
those.
really, they didn't have many, and he didn't even come close. But we ran.
Frightened you anyway. That's for sure. Okay. When you were in the war, did you keep up on the war progress daily, or?
Well, when I was still in high school, I was very interested. I read the paper a lot. I remember I had a scrapbook for even. But then when you're in the service, it's kind of hard sometimes to really keep up with things because you didn't.
You didn't have a
Didn't
radio,
re-
BBC radio or anything like that you could hear?
No, I don't remember that anyhow.
We were fortunate. I had a little BBC radio I had all the time. Kept up on the war pretty well. Okay. Do you think, in your opinion, that the American soldiers should be schooled on any certain thing more before they go into combat? Any particular thing that they should be schooled on?
Well, I don't. I think that for our armed service to be successful, the people, they have to have a sense of duty. I've always been amazed during World War II how most everyone tried to do their best, and
Right.
and I think maybe that's kind of difficult
You
to
need that
instill
attitude.
in people right now. I don't think young people today realize how dedicated the people were during that war.
I agree with you there. I don't think they do either. Well, Don, I don't have any more questions for you, and appreciate you coming in to talk
Yeah.
with us, and we sure thank you for it.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
How do you do? What is your name?
Herschel, Scheidt,
And where were you born, Herschel?
in Tellman County.
You were?
Yes.
Well, I'm not surprised with that. And when were you born?
Sand Creek Township on a farm.
When?
When? 1921.
It was a good year. How
I know she'd
old?
get my age out. But
Yeah. Well, we all, listen, any of us who were in World War II,
I'm just kidding.
not that I was in it, but I sure lived through it. Were you drafted for
Yes.
World War II?
Yes.
How old were you when you were drafted?
Yes, it must have been 20.
Had you been to college, or were you drafted right from home?
Drafted from home.
Were you married then?
No,
You were.
that I got married, what was it, 1 week before I went to service.
Somebody.
So I got drafted before I got married.
You did, yeah. But you'd known your wife.
Oh yeah, I
quite
went
a
with her
long
about
time.
6 years.
Oh, well, that made it nice for you and her too. Then you were drafted, and what area of service were you in?
Army,
In infantry or?
44th Division.
44th.
That was infantry division.
Uh-huh.
I was in the 63rd Engineer Combat Unit, which is in the 44th Division.
Yeah. Now, when you say a combat unit, that's an actual fighting.
Yeah, we built bridges and blew up bridges or anything like that for the infantry.
And before they went in, or as they were coming in?
Sometime, yeah.
Yes. Where did you take your training?
Fort Lewis, Washington.
Were you there until you were?
I was there almost a year,
Mhm.
and then they sent us. We was the first outfit, I guess, that went directly to France from the United States. Most of the units went through England, and then over. But we was the first one that landed in Cherbourg.
Mhm.
So then we had to go into Lunéville, France, before we went into combat, which is, I don't know how many miles, but not too awful far.
Where were the Germans at this time?
They was just about in, like you say, around Lunéville, France.
Yeah. So
Still
you had
in
to
France.
fight. You had to prepare the way for the combat troops to go in and.
Well, the infantry went in first, but I mean, if they need any bridges built or anything like that, why, we'd have to go up and build them or blow bridges or anything like that. I mean,
Where were you on Pearl Harbor Day? Do you remember what you were doing?
yeah, it's over at my girlfriend's house.
Your wife.
My wife now, yes. That
Were
was
you-
on a Sunday, I think.
Yeah, Sunday evening. Well, that's when I heard about it. What were you doing? Were you just on a date? You take her out, or?
I think they just had some kind of a family get-together.
Oh, I
I don't
see.
really remember what it was. There were several of us there.
How did you feel about it? Did you?
Well, being that young, you never thought too much about it. But I know what became my father-in-law. I know he said right then he had 5 boys, and he said, that don't sound good to me. They were going to get into war, which we did.
Then how about VJ Day? Where were you? Do you
I was
remember?
down in pretty close to Fern Pass, which is right on the Austrian-Italian border. We'd went through France, Germany, and Austria, and into the very edge of Italy.
How many beer bridges did you blow up?
Pardon?
Do you remember how
Oh,
many
well, I don't
bridges?
know about that. I wasn't in the demolition squad, so
Oh,
I didn't really do any
yeah.
blowing up myself. But I mean, we done a lot of. We put the bridge across the Rhine at Mannheim, and
Just describe that to me.
it's a floating bridge,
Yeah.
pontoon they call it. and you just one pontoon right after the other, and then you lay your boards across it. Of course, it's wavy, but I mean, it holds quite a bit of weight.
Well, you had trucks that carried all this equipment?
Right.
And the boards too? Or?
Mm-hmm. Now that's what they called a red ball route at that time. They had one bunch of people that done nothing but drive trucks from back at the depot, wherever they could pick up equipment and bring it up to the front lines for the units to use.
Yeah. Was there something about Cummins diesels being used in that red ball?
I read that in the paper, but I don't remember any of
Yeah,
that.
well, I don't think it's authenticated, but so now I know what the red ball
Yeah,
is.
that's what it is.
Exactly, yeah.
They'd just unload their equipment and then just head right back and pick up another load.
Well, how were those pontoons fastened together? Did they?
Just with clamps and bolts, or I guess you'd call them.
They just kind of automatically slipped into place.
Yeah.
Fascinating. How did you do by hand? Did you manually lift those, or did they
Yeah.
have cranes?
No, we didn't have no crane. It was manual.
Boy, you had to be strong, didn't you?
Well, they had a lot of guys.
Did any of your siblings serve in the war too?
No, but I got a grandson that's in the Army now.
You do.
Yeah. He went to college, and he took ROTC, and he just liked it so well, he just dropped out of college and joined the Army.
Doesn't that make you feel pretty good?
Pardon?
Doesn't that make you feel pretty good about
Well, in a way, but I'd like to see him get his college education first, but he's got plans to do that after he gets out. But
it? Yeah. Did you go to a college on the GI Bill?
No,
You didn't.
no.
Oh, so many people did. Did you read Stars and Stripes when you were overseas?
Yeah.
Did you have radio contact to hear the news, or did you?
Never heard much of that, no.
You didn't. Well, how did you get your news? Was it just
That's about all you got.
was from Stars and Stripes?
Stars and Stripes, yeah.
And rumors and.
Rumors, right.
Oh, I'm sure rumors just were terrible. Well, then you got married when you came home.
No, I got married before I left.
Oh, but that's right before.
Yeah.
And what did you do when you came home?
I just went back to Arvin's and went to work again,
You did.
and got in a tool room and ended up being a tool maker.
Uh-huh. Did you feel that the country was really united behind the war efforts?
More so than I've ever seen it. I mean, if we just had that now, 'cause it seemed like everybody did. They had something to do. I mean, people was at home. They was all working a lot of overtime, you know, and yeah, I think everybody was united, really.
More so than even in the Korean conflict?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think everybody felt that that's something that had to be done, you know, like over in Germany. They had to stop Hitler, and everybody was behind it. Some of this Korean and Vietnam, you know, you got some people says that's right, and some people don't go along with that. So they weren't united, I don't think, like you were World War II.
A global threat there. Then you felt that you were treated fairly when you got home, and you went right back to work.
Yeah, I think so.
No problems with jobs.
No problem.
And do you think that history has presented the World War II fairly through the years?
Well, we thought that that was the end of all wars, you know, but it don't.
We thought it was World War
That was
I.
it. Yeah, World War I was going to be the end, but I don't know. Nowadays, I think we got too much politics. Of course, I'm not a politician, but I mean, I don't know. There's just a lot of things going on in this country that I don't think's right.
Do you think more could be done in the schoolrooms, the classrooms,
Yeah, I think that.
to teach patriotism as well as about
Yeah,
the
I think it could.
World War II?
Although I remember when I was in school, we took a lot of this European history that I never thought much of. You know, you wasn't interested in it. But I should have been. But, you know, that was just something you had to take, and we took it.
Do you think that your time overseas gave you a different slant on history?
Yes. Sure did. You realize what World War I was, that's for sure.
Yeah. and how the people suffered then, and
Yeah, and well, World War II, I mean, it was just everything. I mean, your prison camps and over in Germany and France and Austria and everywhere I was, all of after you got in there and took the towns or cities, then after we took it, within your civilians, where they went during all this fighting, I don't know. But there wouldn't be any civilians in these big towns. As soon as the fighting was over, then they'd filter back in. And they was all just tickled to death to see, you know. I mean, might as well say liberate them, even though they wasn't in a prison camp, but they had to do what Hitler said. I mean, I often said this could happen right here awful easy, just like it did over there. You wonder how Hitler got started like he did, but I mean, if you got everybody scared to where if I don't go with him, they're going to shoot me, why, what do? You go along with it. And that could happen here.
it could. The kids should be taught in classrooms that this could happen here then.
I think so. Yeah.
Do you have any special remembrances you would want to share with us about your experiences overseas?
Well, not really. I mean, it's just something you just kind of forgot about, you know, and
Sure.
wanted to.
Yeah.
Just like some of the high points. I mean, we took the town of Worms, and we took Mannheim and some of the bigger towns, and threw the bridge across the Rhine, and just some of them things you kind of remember, you know. But
See, that's one thing that stands out in my own memory, is that
Yeah.
bridge across the Rhine.
hmm
Because it had been blown up by the Germans. hadn't
Right.
it?
Yeah. They'd blowed all our bridges, so we couldn't get across.
Did you keep your uniforms and your...
Oh yeah, I got that. Even cut my big long overcoat down to Mackinac, you know, but I don't think I ever wore it.
Oh, golly, those were heavy, really heavy. So you think that it was an experience that you lived through and experienced from?
Yes. Yeah. It makes you realize what war was. Of course, I was fortunate to come out with no injuries or death, like you say, like some people did, but you learn a lot, and I mean, I've always said maybe I get into politics too much, but if every politician had to go over and fight in a war a little bit, there wouldn't be any more wars.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Herschel, for
You're welcome.
sharing your experiences and your ideas with us and giving us your time.
Welcome and thank you for being with us. What is your name?
Todd Huffman,
And you were born where?
Potomac County,
Tommy County. How long you been in Tommy County?
all my life.
You went to school in Tommy County and so on.
Yep.
Okay. What do you remember most about the war?
I remember when it started and when it was over,
The best part.
for sure. But
Okay. How old were you
when I went in,
when you
I
went
was
in?
20.
Yes. 20 years old.
Turned 20 about a week after.
And what branch of the service did you go into?
Engineers, combat engineers,
In the Army.
Army, right.
And you went overseas.
Yeah.
And where were you overseas?
Started out in England and then went to France and Belgium and Germany. Ended up in Germany when the war was over.
Okay, the war actually ended before you got back.
Yeah, war in Europe did, yeah.
How long were you in Europe after the war ended before you got back?
About, 2 months
2 months?
or less, less
Okay.
than that. We came home to get ready to go to Japan.
Did you go to Japan?
No.
You didn't go?
Got us first to Tacoma, Washington.
That's when the war ended in Japan.
The war ended when I was here, on 30-day furlough, but I had to go out there anyway.
Okay, I see. Okay. And you remember Pearl Harbor, no doubt.
Sure do.
Where were you when that happened to Pearl Harbor?
Sitting in my car in front of the Greeks listening to the radio.
Oh, you remember.
I sure do.
Okay. You remember D-Day.
Yeah. I was standing guard in England.
You was in England.
I was one of the lucky ones. I didn't go on D-Day.
I see.
Or I wouldn't be here to tell the story, probably.
Did you go into the war when the war started on D-Day? Did you go in then or not?
No, no.
You went in-
I was still in England.
You stayed in England?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
And I'm not sure how many days it was, possibly 2 weeks before we went in to the beach.
Across the channel, what beach did you go in on?
Utah Beach.
Utah Beach?
Mhm.
Right. But it was cleared beach when you went in?
Yeah. It was, they had it pretty well secured. They had a good beachhead there.
Good. That's the way to go in on the beaches.
That's the way to go in.
Right.
I never even got wet. I was one of the lucky ones.
You were lucky. What were your duties while you were in the service now? What did you do actually over there during the war?
We done a little of everything there. When we first went in there, we done a lot of road work. The roads was all tore up. And we done a lot of repairing on the roads with mostly captured material, whatever we could pick up.
I see.
In the way of asphalt. We even patched roads with concrete.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You didn't get any on airway repair or anything like that?
No. No.
Airports?
No.
Okay.
Built bridges. We built a lot of bridges.
What's your fondest memory of the war while you were over there? What really impressed you?
Well, I guess I remember the Battle of the Bulge better than anything. It was, everything was very disorganized. They wasn't expecting it.
That was in winter time with snow?
Yeah, 16th of December.
Yes, sir.
Never will forget it. We was pretty well settled in there, just as a kind of a holding action for the winter.
I see.
It had a nice place to live. We lived with the people there in that little town. The people made room for two or three
German
souls.
people?
No, Belgian people.
Oh, Belgian
we was in
people. You were
Belgium.
in Belgium. I see.
Right there
Okay.
outside of Aachen, Germany, only it was in Belgium.
I see. Okay. They treated you real well, did they?
Oh, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That's unusual.
I don't know what the government paid them, but I'm sure they,
Reimbursed them.
reimbursed them some way.
Probably,
yeah.
yeah.
Sooner or later.
Do you have any other members of your family in the service?
Well, no, my cousin Bob, he was in the service, but nobody in my immediate family.
Was he in the war also?
Yeah, he was in the
He's war.
Philippines.
He's in the
yeah.
Philippines. Later on.
Yeah, he's going to be with us tomorrow here.
Oh, good. While you were over there, did you have any news on how the war was going at that time?
Not really. The most we knew was just reading in the Stars and Stripes well.
You had no radios?
No.
No newspapers? Didn't get any newspapers at all?
Got Stars and Stripes once a week, didn't we?
Did what?
Stars and Stripes, didn't that come once a week?
I think I didn't get that too many times. I'm not real sure, but I think it did come
We
out
get
once
it
a week.
about once a week.
I think it was. That was a
Yeah.
good paper when you got it.
Oh, yeah, sure was.
Is there any other item that really racked your memory that you'd like to talk about?
Oh, not too much. It was really an experience while it was going on, but you wouldn't want to do it again.
No, I agree with you on that.
Wouldn't take nothing for it, but you wouldn't want to do it again. Everything. Wouldn't want to do everything again.
I want to ask you one last question. Do you think that the American soldiers were trained sufficiently for the war? In what short time we had to be trained?
Yeah, I do.
Think you did?
I think so. I think they was pretty well ready.
Okay. Well, I sure thank you for being with us.
But there's one other thing I'd like to say.
All right.
Right here, this last.
Okay.
I don't believe that they do teach in a school enough about something that didn't happen any longer ago than that. 50 years ago, in World War II.
You mean they don't teach in today's school?
No. The kids don't know too much about it. They just, something in the book.
I do know that they have history on World War II. I know that.
Well, I suppose they do.
I'm sure of that. All right, sir. Well, I sure thank you for coming in and being with us.
Can you tell us your name, please? VanArsdall. And what was your date of birth?
No, you shouldn't ask quick questions like that. My date of birth was August 18th, 1916.
Where were you born?
I was born in Danville, Indiana. It's up north and west of Indianapolis.
Hendricks County.
Hendricks County, yes.
When did you come to Bartholomew County?
Well, about a year later.
Okay.
Actually, I came to Columbus a year after I was born. And my parents brought me down here. My father got a position at a jewelry store. And he's lived here ever since.
So you, when Pearl Harbor happened, you were, what, 20?
Well, let's say I'm 78 now.
Okay.
And yeah, I was in the States yet when Pearl Harbor.
Do you remember when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, I was in Ellison, Texas. I was down there with my outfit, and that happened, and it was a terrible thing to hear. You know, we thought, oh boy, now we really are.
So you were already in the service. But
Yeah, I was in the service.
what happened to you then after Pearl Harbor?
Well, we moved from Ellison, Texas to the West Coast. We were in Riverside, California for, I don't know, a month or two. And then we were moved to Montana, went up to Great Falls, Montana, where they were ferrying airplanes over to Russia. And we were there through one terrible winter. Got down to 30 and 35 and 40 below zero. And then, but we weren't there very long. And we moved then to Newport News, Virginia. And went overseas from there on troop ships. And we joined the 58th Bomber Wing, and we were in the 28th Service Squadron. And we're with the B-29 outfits until the end of the war. So it took us 3 months to get to India, where we were scheduled to go at the air base there at Chicago. And bombing raids were carried out over the Huffman, over the Himalayas into China. And China was in uproar then at the same time. So we had to carry gasoline over the Huffman as well to the airplanes over there. But there was not too many raids carried out from China on Japan. But later, our outfit was changed and sent into the Pacific, and we were at Tinian Island, there where the Enola Gay took off. And so we got together on all of that. That was a fascinating part of the trip.
Well, tell me about that.
Well, we didn't know what was going on, of course. We knew something big was afoot, you know, but we were not told what the actual thing was that was going to happen. But it wasn't long we found out. And the airplane came back, and it was a big celebration on the island. Our outfit was on the West Island, and the Enola Gay took off on the west air strip. And we were, the Enola Gay took off the North Strip. But we knew what was going on after that.
What were your emotions about that?
Oh, we were just flabbergasted. I was in a photographic section. We had to do all of the photographing of that mission, and we got to see all of the action. We got to see the bombs dropping. We got to see the terrible explosion, you know, and that was on Herschel. And it was a time that we just couldn't hardly believe what we were seeing. You know, we couldn't imagine anything of that power. It was a tremendous explosion. And then, of course, they carried on other raids after that on Nagasaki as well, and leveled those cities almost completely with just one bomb.
So, were you on the plane itself, or were you
No,
seeing
I
films?
was not on the airplane, but I did get to go as an observer on the second mission. And I was a photographic technician, so I had to go up and take pictures of what was happening. And some of our pictures we brought back and we developed ourselves right in the laboratory. And it was a kind of a fascinating time. Really.
So with the Nagasaki trip, or was that the one that you were on?
Yeah, the second. And then I had an opportunity to fly over the ceremonies when the band capitulated. But one of the officers had a little more rank than I did, so I didn't get to go. I heard all that. There was a tremendous number of photographs in that as well, from the air as well as on the ground. We got a lot of that processing. So I had an interesting time. in service. We got to see a lot of the world, and as well as all of our country. I was north, south, east, and west. Changed around from one place to another many, many times.
Let me go back to that time in Montana. So they were
Yes.
ferrying planes.
Yeah, they were ferrying new airplanes over into Russia. So they were being sent over there because of they were working in cooperation with the Russians and the Japanese.
So those all went to the Russian effort in Japan.
I
as
suppose,
opposed to-
yeah. We really didn't know what they were doing with them after they got there. Russians didn't like to develop much of anything, so we were in the dark what they were using them for, but we were paid for them quite handsomely. They were expensive airplanes, and we had to go somewhere. They could use. So we got sold some planes. I think it was kind of a bargain for both of us.
Yeah.
But it cost them much more to build those airplanes than it cost us to get rid of them. And that was to maintain them.
How long were you there in India?
In India, almost a year, in Chakulia. This was near Calcutta. And of course, we were there long enough that it was hot, it was terrible. They think this is hot, but it was terrible over there. And it also didn't smell very well. You know, India's never been a really nice place to go and see.
Yeah.
But it was a fascinating time for us. We got the R&R, and we could go up into the mountains in India and have a rest camp up there. It was beautiful. I even got to see the Todd Hall. I have a lot of pictures of that. That was my duty, to take pictures in there.
What were, so you just took pictures of
Practically everything.
everything?
Right. We had free rain on cameras at any time, and we used them a lot.
Had you had some photographic experience?
Well, just amateurish. And then when I was in Bowman Field, when I first went into the service, I took school, school in photography, and graduated from that. And as a result, I got 2 rating heights, which helped.
Yeah.
The time my wife was with me, all the time I was in the States, and then when we finally left, then I had a little more rank than most of the rest of the people. That helped. She needed a little money on the side as well. We saved all our money.
Were you on any of the missions that went over the hump?
One, and that we were on a gasoline tank commission. We had big rubber tanks in place of the bomb, you know. And they filled those, and it just barely would let us get over the passes. We could not fly over the highest mountains at all. The load was too heavy, so they had these big rubber neoprene tanks, but they fitted right into the B-29s. And then we had to fly through the passes, through the narrow spots, and that was scary. I don't think I'd care to do that again.
Is there any firing on your plane?
No, not over the hump. No, it was a remote area, extremely remote. And we'd come down and land in places where they could go on with the gasoline, where they were being, or we just used the tankers for that. But that went on for about 5-6 months. And we put the gasoline in there. China didn't have any gasoline at the time.
Yeah.
So we had to furnish a farm. We were paid for it, I guess. Yeah.
Any other war experiences? We talked a little bit about Glenn Miller and
Yeah.
records and things. You
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, no, not really. I started out in Bowman Field in Louisville, and that's where I had the photographic school there. And then we were moved from there to Shreveport, Louisiana, and we were down there for, I think, a month or so. But we were hopscotched all over the country, it seemed like. And then we went to Marshfield from there, or from Shreveport to Galveston, Texas. And we were out there. We didn't know why we were there. But we were there for quite some time. In fact, I got a 3-day pass from there to come home and get married. And that was an experience we had to recur. And then I went from there to Marshfield, which was in Riverside, California. And then my wife got to come and be with me we were fortunate enough to be able to do that. We lived off the air base there. Had a little house of our own, which was nice.
Yeah.
And then, right away, we were moved from there to Great Falls. That was right in the middle of the winter, when it was the coldest possible part of the West.
Well, run on tape.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad I could give you that.
Well, everybody is. It's been really hard to stop people.
Sometimes that's probably right.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is just a very thin, small portion of what I really experienced. Glad to share it with you.
Well, I'm glad that you're sharing with us.
Okay.
Appreciate you taking the time.
Your name is what, sir?
Zack Ellison.
And you were born where?
I was born in Charleston, West Virginia in 1950,
And you're living where now?
in Bartholomew County here in Columbus.
How long have you been in Bartholomew County?
I've been here since 1984, so
84.
11 years.
Okay. Are you employed locally here?
I work at Cummins Engine
Is that what
Company.
brought you here?
Yes.
Okay. I understand you were in the war. And what war?
I was in the Vietnam War.
Vietnam War. Could you tell us a little about some of your memories there? For instance, any outstanding memory that you have of the Vietnam War?
It rained a lot. It was hot. It was like people that probably fought in Guam and Iwo Jima and that kind of tropical conditions. I was an aviator. I was a navigator on C-130s in the Marine Corps. And what I most remember is every night we went up and did flare drops for medevac missions and firefights and things like that. So that's mostly what I remember of the nighttime. The daytime we did refueling of A-4 jets and F-4 jets as they went out on missions.
Did you evacuate the wounded? Was that one of your
Yes,
jobs?
we would go down to places like Chu Lai and pick up the wounded as they came in out of the field.
Where's your base?
I was based in Da Nang.
Da Nang.
Yes. And the Marine Corps pretty much had what's known as the I Corps region, which was the northernmost part of South Vietnam. And we took care of the Marine installations all through that region.
Okay. Now, when you picked up wounded, how close to the fighting were you at that time? Do you know?
Well, the fighting was generally all around you. But it mostly occurred at night. It was more prevalent at night than it was in the daytime. And so we would generally come in the daytime and bring out the wounded and bring out the ones that were killed. Most of the wounded flew in helicopters. They got into helicopters and they took them right to the hospital.
I see. It's unusual. In World War II, it was just the opposite. We fought in the daytime. At night, we kind of rested a little.
It is a little different.
Is that because that they were not organized properly to fight, and they would slip in at night to get you?
Well, they did a lot of that. When you really look at it,
They trained that.
they owned the nighttime and we owned the daytime.
Yes, sir.
And we knew how to handle the daytime battles, but they were at home in their own country, and they knew how to maneuver and travel at night.
They knew the country.
That's right.
Yes, sir.
And a lot of the public truly supported them. I mean, a lot of the local people supported the Vietnamese Army's position, so it made it a little more difficult for the Americans to try to gain that support.
Did Americans have any trouble with the civilian population over there?
Oh, quite often. They would be working for the military in the daytime at some of the bases, and then at night they would be in some of the battles and get killed, and you'd find out about it.
They didn't like the Americans too well at all.
So that's right. They played both sides to the middle. It was a little different. I think in some of the past wars, we knew a little better where we stood with the people we were defending and fighting.
Right. Now, I'm going to get personal with you and ask you a question. The Vietnam veterans were not recognized like they should have been when they came back to the United States. In your opinion, why?
I just don't believe the public ever supported the idea, fully supported the idea that we had any business over there. It was never proven
why we needed to be over there. We heard the theories about the communism and the domino effect and all that, that it would just spread through that entire area. When in fact, I guess in retrospect, looking back on it, we've been away from there now 20 years, and that in fact has not happened. There has not been this domino effect. So there were probably some concepts that and some ideas that people thought would happen that did not prove out. And the public, in some cases, did not support that effort. It was very expensive for the country, and you saw people, like in all wars, 19 and 20 years old, on the 6 o'clock news. In a lot of that it was much more real time than it had been in other wars, and there wasn't a lot of censorship, and so it was a different war.
Pretty much, yes.
Probably would have been much like, in some respects, like Korea.
Yes.
You know.
Do you feel that if our government would have declared a war and went in there to win that war, there would have been different feelings all around?
I don't believe so.
You don't think so?
No. I think if we, as a country, had felt truly endangered by those people and that activity in Vietnam, if the United States had felt threatened or endangered, then there would have been full support.
Do you think the war would have escalated if we had done that?
Well,
I mean, Russia coming in and so on like that?
I don't know. I don't believe Russia wanted to come in and get involved in that war. They were always
How
there.
about China?
The Chinese, now, I believe the Chinese would have been more apt to come in than the Russians.
In my opinion, I always felt like our government made a big mistake. I really did, for not declaring a war. And I don't blame the veterans at all.
Right. I mean, they could have, we could have gone in there and done a few things differently.
Right.
People say, well, if we'd gone in there and fought like we really wanted to, we could have won it. But those people were very, very set in their ways. And you look at all the millions of Vietnamese that were killed in that war.
Yes.
And they were very, they were very focused and driven from their point of view to defeat us and run us out.
Right.
So it would have been much more difficult to ever go in there and have completely had a victory.
Right. Do you feel like that war has helped or damaged the United States in any way?
Well, the only thing I can think of is it took away a lot of young men, in their prime. I don't think it. Well, I think it has, in many cases, made us think twice or three times about getting involved in conflicts that we don't have any strategic purpose for being there.
Right.
And I think it's important to, if we need to be involved in a war, to get involved.
Right.
But to go in there because there's a purpose, and there's some true reason
Should
of
be a
national
purpose.
security. Yes,
Absolutely,
of
yes.
going in there and winning.
Right. Well, I certainly thank you for coming in to talk with us. I've enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me here.
Thank you very much.
My name's Dick Thayer and lived Hope, Indiana. Was raised on a farm. Drafted into the service in November 1941. Thought I'd go into the infantry, but ended up in the Coast Guard. And then I transferred from the Coast Guard to the Air Corps. And I was at many bases around the United States, and finally they roped me in as an armor gunner on a B-17 with the 8th Air Force. And I was stationed in England. I was on the first 3 Berlin raids, and I think it was a 10th or 11th mission. I was shot down over Châteaudun, France. That was a little air base that we thought was a milk run. We got a wing shot off, and I ended up being in a prison camp at Krems, Austria. That's about 20 miles west of Vienna on the Danube. I was in the prison camp. I was shot down on March 28th of 44, and was liberated May the 5th of 45. So I was in the prison camp roughly 14 months. But the Germans, the Russians were taking Vienna on the Eastern Front, and we watched that at night, you know, from the prison camp. We thought the German guards would go off and leave us and let the Russians overrun us, but they were afraid of the Russian soldiers, and we'd convinced them that they would be treated better by the American soldiers. They knew the war was over. All the fronts are closing in. So they took us out down the Danube to the west, and they divided. There was about 4,000 Americans there, and they divided in the prison camp. Stalag 17B, it was the name of the prison camp, the movie 17B, and I'm not too sure that the pictures that weren't actually taken in the prison camp at Krems, that looked just like the prison camp. But we went down the Danube, and then we had an English-speaking captain in charge of each group, and some of the men weren't in very good shape. I was in better physical shape. Some of them had been prisoners longer than I was, and we got awful hungry the last winter there. And he would relay information on to me that I would give to the boys. And we knew we were going to walk into the American army so that we didn't try to escape. And all the fronts are closing in from every place, and it was a mess in Germany. The Eastern Front, we Western, Northern, all the people trying to get away from the war front. And he would point out castles along the Danube and tell the history of them. In the castle, he pointed out Richard the Lionhearter was the old exiled king in England. He pointed out, showed me where he'd lived, and he was really interested in us, and you wouldn't have known he was a German. He was an awful nice fellow. And they would stop us along the road where we could steal food at night or do something. I mean, we were hungry, and we used cigarettes as a means of barter. We had saved our cigarettes, and the people loved the American cigarette, and we would use that as a means of barter. If they had bread, we could trade cigarette for bread. If they parked us by a barn at night, we had a trader that had an Indian from Port Arthur, Texas, Dallas Paul Alfer. He'd go out, and one night he stole a little pig from us from the sound. We'd boil that pig so he'd get into the chicken houses, but he kept us, fed us on the road. If it hadn't been for him, I don't know what would have happened to us. But then we walked right on into Bernal, France, into a forest. And we stopped there, and there was a spearhead from the Third Army overran us, and we saw them take the little town of Bernal, and then they came out and liberated us. And we took all the Germans' guns and everything, and they had surrendered, but they couldn't get us out for 4 days. This was just a spearhead going through. So I stayed in the forest 4 days. And then they flew us into Camp Lucky Strike, what was the distribution center for the pre-OWs. And then I was brought back across on a boat and was discharged on a point system we had then. At that time, we had a point system of 85 points, and I had my 85 points up, and I was discharged from San Antonio, Texas. That's where I got my discharge. And then I came home. I think I got home around middle of October of 45. But
back
I was
to Columbus, you mean?
Back to Columbus, yes. I was out of the service then. But I was liberated May the 5th, and then it took this much time to process us and get us back over here. But then I was discharged from the Army in October of 45.
Did they fly you home back to this country, or did you come back on ship?
I came back on a ship. Part of us came on a ship. Most of them came back on ships. And we were on the ships for a considerable time. I don't know whether the airplanes were being used for something else or what, but they could put more on the ships, you know, and it was probably cheaper transportation for us. I went across on a ship, although a lot of the crews flew across. I was on a crew of 10, and on the crew of 10 we had a wing shot off, and there was only 3 of us got out of the plane, and I have stayed in contact with these 3. But we went across on the Queen Elizabeth. About 15,000 of us went across, and then I came back. I don't know what the name of the ship was, but I imagine that was much cheaper transportation for the government and everything, and faster.
They built a lot of troop ships.
Oh, yes, yes. We had a lot of Liberty ships built and everything. But I look back over these war experiences, and I cannot imagine, hardly, it's hard for me to imagine how we won that war. We had all the stuff that we had to get to the Japanese fronts. We had all these ships being sunk by the thousands and hundreds of thousands of tons off of the coast. We weren't prepared for war. But when we started production here, the production they started here was unbelievable. No one ever thought that we could produce like that. This is where the women started taking over and producing. The men was in the service. But the production of the country was unbelievable. And no one said anything anti the war effort. You didn't, everyone, it was I never had seen so much unity. Everyone was out there doing a job. My wife, who's dead now, she had never worked in a factory, and she joined the WACS. The WACS, that's Women's Auxiliary Corps. See, everyone had to be doing something for the war effort, and I just don't know, no one says anything anti against what we was fighting for. We all seemed to be knowing what we were fighting for. We were all out to win, and the unity, I hope, can be built if the case comes. We have so many segments of disagreement now that I just often wonder if we can ever get the unity back if another crisis would come up. I hope we can, but at that time, no one had anything, but when we were attacked, everybody wanted to go to war, and the women worked, and everyone worked, and it was just an unbelievable machine that was working there, and it was unbelievable to the Germans, it was unbelievable to the Japanese. No one imagined that we could ever start producing the way we produced, and I wouldn't take anything for the experience, but I wouldn't want to go through it again.
And you wouldn't want any of your children or grandchildren to go through it?
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't.
Hope that. I had a couple of questions, though, about your march from Krims. How far did you actually, do you have any idea how far you walked?
I would say we weren't in too good a shape, and of course all the fronts are moving in, and they would have to keep us on the back road. See, the Western Front, everybody's trying to get away from the fronts, and it was a madhouse. I would say we marched 200 to 250 mile in 30 days. I'd say we were making maybe 7 or 8 mile a day, and then they would have to pull us off, you know, to let other people through. So we were on the road about 30 days. And I would say we went from, I never did check it on the map, but we went from Krims, Austria to Bernal, France. It may be a little farther. It might be 250 mile. I don't know why I haven't checked the mileage. I just assumed that I don't know, it's to guess, and we'd march 8 or 10 mile a day. And some of the experience you had, unbelievable. The things you saw, you would never saw. The hardest thing for me, Paul, you'd get a kick out of this, might not be good for tape. But anyway, there was nothing left of the community. The towns were completely destroyed. Where they lived, I don't know. No restrooms, no nothing. Everything was gone. And I'd come into these towns, and you'd see men and women just squatting on the streets, you know, like nothing. And I got so constipated, Paul, I thought I was going to die. I like to never got so I could make myself do that, but it was musty, and you finally just got so you didn't think anything about it. But people adapt quick to the circumstances, and the circumstances of those people, they just had nothing. They was completely destroyed. Our biggest danger as prisoners of war was the civilians getting hold of us. See, the airmen. After we were shot down, we went to a place called Dulag Loof. Now, that's where they interrogate you, throw you in solitary confinement and interrogate you. Put you in solitary confinement about a week, and we had our flying suits on. The people would try to get us away from the guards. We'd bomb their homes, we'd kill their families, Fligger gangsters, they called us, Fligger gangsters, and would get a hold of us and try to pull us away from the guards. And the guards lived by the Geneva Treaty. They would beat those people off like a pack of animals and shot a couple rather than let them take us out. And we're thinking, oh, God, hold the line. But they hated, the civilians had been hurt so bad that they hated the Fligger gangsters. That was us. But once you got with the military, you felt pretty safe. And I have thought so many times, if the tables were reversed here, and my family had been killed, and my homes and everything I had destroyed, would I as a soldier, defend that man that did that like they defended us. I mean, I admired the Germans for that. We had a Geneva Treaty, and of course we had bad atrocities. The stormtroopers were bad. They would kill you just as quick as they'd look at you. But yet, these soldiers took us through all of that hatred and everything in one piece. And the Geneva Treaty was a wonderful thing, and as bad as they were, they still tried to keep us alive as soldiers. And I don't know whether I would have done the same thing if tables had been reversed.
I think the Army had a different code than the SS. The
Oh, yes,
stormtroopers.
yes. See, they were strictly Hitler taught. Yeah, that's right.
And then, too, they were better off being captured by the Americans
Right.
than even staying as soldiers in their own country.
We had, our prison camp was guarded by what we called the old Volksrum. They were an older group of men that had been on the fronts but weren't able to be on the fronts anymore, or shouldn't have been on the fronts anymore. And we weren't physically mistreated like some of the prison camp personnel was. And we was lucky that we didn't have to move but one time during the war. A lot of the camps were kicked out and moved on the road 3 or 4 times, and that's when it was bad. Your stormtroopers, your SS men, when we met them on the road, you didn't say anything because they wanted a reason to kill you. But I'm talking about the Army generally, though. I mean, I just can't get over them complying with the Geneva Treaty as well as they did, thank goodness.
Well, we're all grateful for that and grateful to have you here.
Yeah.
And then what did you do, Dick, after you came home?
I came back and I had a couple $1,000 back pay, and Mom and Pop we were such a straight family, and I was playing cards and I was doing things, and I had a girlfriend, and I was to spend money. And so anyway, I ended up getting married on December the 20th to Evelyn Miller, and her dad was a veterinarian in Hope, and I moved in with him. You couldn't find a home then. Pop come over one Saturday morning and just raised the devil, says, "You'll never amount to a damn if you don't get out of the house." Well, you couldn't find a home to live, and I come to Columbus with him, and he parked by the old jail. Paul, you kids probably don't know it. It's on 2nd and Washington Street, great big old 3-story jail. Parked there, and he kept getting home, and I said, "Well, Pop, the only thing I know to do to get a place to live is get in jail." And I was going home, and he said, "Run for sheriff, Dick." And I said, "Oh, God, I hadn't thought of that." So anyway, I was pretty popular, you know, with war notes. And I ran for sheriff. I went home and I said to Eb, "How would you like for me to be sheriff?" And oh, she loved that excitement. See, anything exciting, but she didn't know how to boil water. I said, "Well, you know, the sheriff's wife has to cook for the prisoners now." "Well, I'll do it, Dick." I said, "Well, you'll have to learn." "I'll learn." Well, I ran, was elected, and we went to housekeeping in the old jail. And I go up, and Walter O'Neill was the sheriff ahead of me. He wouldn't let me in until midnight the 1st. And I go up January 1st to get Eb, and I'd made arrangements. I had Mom coming down, and I had a cook coming down to see till Evelyn learned how to cook. I come on, Eb, you got to go. I said, "How many we got in jail?" And I said, 22. She said, "I can't do it." She just got hysterical. I said, "Well, you told me, Deb." But anyway, she goes down there, and she got so close to the prisoners. She lived right with them. She fed them, and she loved that work. She loved those prisoners. I mean, in other words, they wanted to be in jail. She treated them too good, and she'd feed them. We only got 35 cents a meal. I've seen her feed them shrimp, and I'm losing my butt, see, trying. But anyway, she loved the jail. And then I was elected sheriff twice, and then I ran for mayor, and I was mayor here at Columbus. I was elected, and I went in 52 to 56, and then I didn't run for mayor again, and went to the bank, which was a big mistake for me. It wasn't my type of work. So I was there 3 years, and then I went back to the farm, where I knew I'd eventually be, and I farmed and retired from the farm. Then I did come back while I was on the farm. My wife died about 16 years ago, and I got away from the civic affairs, you know, and the girls thought I should get back, and they asked me to run for county council here. Oh, that's been 6 or 8 years ago. I didn't think I'd ever get it again. I thought all my old friends was dead, but anyway, I was elected county council here. That's been 4 or 5 years ago. But I never made any money out of politics, but my goodness, the people I met. that you meet in politics, the good people. I mean, and I was a real good civic-minded person, interested in Columbus and interested in the county, and I've just had a life unbelievable. I mean, I've gone through a lot, but I just consider myself the luckiest man in the world. I do. I mean, everything seemed to happen good for me. I don't know why one man lives and another man dies. I was out to this airplane. I can tell you stories. They get talking, it's bad. But I was a waste gunner. I could tell you, on this story for an hour, and all the crew had just snap-on chutes, and you hung your chutes on the side of the plane so they wouldn't get in the road you were shooting. Well, I'd been hit with flak a couple of times, and I thought, God, if I could get a back chute, that'd give me a little protection in the back, and I stood on my flak suit. And this day we were shot down. They shoot the right wing off the plane on my side, the end of it, and the plane goes into a spin, and when you get in the centrifugal force, you can't even raise your finger, you know. And when I saw the wing go, I jumped over on top of an escape hatch on the back of the B-17. I took Max Andrews one to sit, and I took him through the plane to show him. And I was raised in a real religious family and believed in the power of prayer strong, but I'm going down. I'm right on the target, and I can see a red handle on this plane, and if you can pull that out, it pulls the pins out of the door. And I knew if I get the pins out of the door, I could beat the face, but I can't raise my finger. I can see it. And I see Mom's picture so well, you know. My mother, reached up and get her, got out, see. So I'm a firm believer of the power of prayer. But you wonder why. Everything I did just seemed to turn out so good. I mean, bad, but yet everything. And I just consider myself awful lucky. But we live in a good, wonderful world, and I just hope that we teach history a little more. I mean, I've got grandkids that I don't know, but people can learn so much from history. The sacrifices that have been made by people ahead of us to give us what we got. I mean, it's important, and I just hope that we still got the thing in the young people that if worst come to worst, they could unify themselves like they did in World War II. It was just something, and maybe they would, see. I mean, if you had a bombing or something, people can be rallied.
We certainly don't want that to happen, but do you think they could do more in the schools to strengthen this feeling
I think
of
they do. Now, I always liked history and always liked geography, and I was watching the television show the other day, and you learn a lot from history. I mean, we watched the Roman Empire fall, and if you read the history, we knew why they fall, the corruptness and everything. We watch nations fall through corruptness and stuff, through history. But I was watching this television show the other night, and I don't know whether it was Cookie Roberts or what it was, but this person was telling about tests in history. They'd give all of these tests, and on the 4th of July, better than half of the senior class didn't know what the 4th of July even celebrated, see. See, that kind of scares you. I mean, because we've become all pretty much a me society anymore. I mean, we aren't close like we used to be out on the farm. You know, you didn't have anything and you worked to help one another, and we had the horse and buggy days, and now things have got so easy for us. Television, we didn't hear of such a thing as that, you know, but we worked together as a unit, and we were just a big, happy country family. And now we've got so many things, and the television shows the young kids what other people have. Well, I didn't know anyone else lived other than the way I lived. We was in poverty, but yet we were happy. I didn't dream, but when you see television, and it's only natural, Paul, that you see people having this and you see them having that. Well, I want some of it. So the first thing we do, we have a tendency to put values in the right perspectives. I want that. And sometimes we put money ahead of values. I mean, I hope we don't lose our values. I mean, the values of love for people. And money, they say, is the root of all evil. The desire for it is. I mean, money is something you got to have to live on, Paul, but yet don't let money get you to do something that isn't ethically right. I'm afraid our ethics are getting a little lax, and I think we should teach it more.
Well, if we had people like you to go around and talk to people the way you've talked to us today, I think you could be an inspiration to the young people.
Well, I've had just such a good life, but I'd like for people to share it with me. But power of prayer, see, is something. I just wondered so many times, why should I live and the other 7 men get killed on that plane? We're not supposed to know that.
No, that's right. But we are glad you're here to tell us about it, and thank you so
Enjoyed
much.
it.
It really